Okay, we are live.
Thank you. Those of you guys who have tuned in, we're about 3 minutes from getting started. So thank you for your participation tonight, and bear with us as we're waiting for more community members to join. We're about 2 minutes away from getting started.
Jerry, Nathan put a question in there for you. Can you see the question and answers? You're muted, just so you know.
Oh, thanks, Nathan. Sometimes on PowerPoint, PDF. I have to try that. Thank you.
Mary, the mayor has his hand raised.
I see that. Would you like to promote the mayor to ask his question?
I've unmuted you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jeff. You had a question for me?
Not currently, we don't.
Oh, okay. I thought he said Nathan sent a question. Okay, I'm gonna take my hand down.
You're fine.
And I'm gonna
All right. All right. Well, let's get started. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Fawcett. I am your Downtown Development Coordinator here with the City of Graham, and I'd like to welcome you to our first downtown community meeting since last January when COVID had hit. So we're virtual tonight. If you've joined us by the Zoom platform, please note the meeting is being recorded and live streaming to the city's YouTube channel. On tonight's agenda is a presentation on the Downtown Associate Community Program and the support of the design principles, a benchmark review of accomplishments Graham has made over the last year, and then at the conclusion of the meeting, we will open up for questions. So on your screen, you see myself currently and our presenters. Here shortly, I will black out my screen and then rejoin during the questions. We have enabled the Q&A, so if you have questions about the presentation, you can type them in and I will facilitate those during our Q&A session. And then you can also use the raise hand feature or press *9, and then our IT director, Mr. Jeff Wilson, will notify me that you wish to speak and will promote you just like we experienced with the mayor. So at this point in time, join me in welcoming tonight's presenters, Sherry Adams and Chuck Halsall, coordinators for the North Carolina Main Street and Rural Planning Center's Downtown Programming and Technical Services. Sherry and Chuck, welcome virtually to Graham's community meeting. The floor is yours.
All right, Chuck, you want to tell them who you are a little bit more and where you are and
Sure. My name is Chuck Housel. I'm as Mary said, a coordinator for downtown programming and technical assistance with the North Carolina Main Street Center. I've been doing this since, what did we decide it was, 2017, 16, 15, somewhere in there. I've been with the Department of Commerce since 2006 in varying different roles as community planner, economic development planner, and I've found a home in Main Street. That's about it. I'm based in Greenville, and under normal circumstances, Sherry and I would be probably coming from both ends of the state to meet with y'all personally, but unfortunately, this is what we have to do right now. So,
yeah. And I'm Sherry Adams, and I'm normally in the western part of the state in Asheville. And as Chuck mentioned, we traverse across the state, and usually we would do these in person. So we've learned this year, I guess the key word is pivot. So we're doing all of this virtually. And Chuck and I, we kind of split duties a little bit and take turns doing presentations and providing information. Design is one of the 4 points of the Main Street program, which we'll talk a bit about. But we did want to give a little bit of an overview of where you are in the program and talk to you about the program and really a little bit more of who we are and how we're connected to the state. So Mr. Jeff Wilson, if you can share the screen, we'll just dive right in. And I'll say next when we get to the next slide. All right, so giving an overview, and this is just a stock photo. This one happens to be, I believe, in Elkin, but shows a little bit of design of a rehab project on that first slide. So let's go to the next slide. So we are, as we said before, part of the North Carolina Main Street and Rural Planning Center, and we work under the North Carolina Department of Commerce. We're the state's leading agency for workforce, community, and economic development. In the capacity of the center, we do the downtown revitalization, we provide local and regional market analysis, small area planning, downtown design services through UNCG, and that's for Main Street communities. And we provide economic development strategies within the context of historic preservation, and that's what we hope to achieve with Graham as part of this Downtown Associate Community Program. We do administer the Main Street America program, which I'm going to explain just a little bit more in a few minutes. And when we have money, we can administer the Main Street Solutions Grant. We have not had money in that pot for a few years, but the state has been very gracious in giving us some dollars here and there to help our programs out throughout the years. So when we have money, that is something that you all could look at applying for when you move up to the Main Street status. Next slide, please. So the organizational flow chart, as I mentioned, our program is under the North Carolina Department of Commerce. We have a new Commerce Secretary that started, I think she started in February, maybe, Machelle Sanders. We're glad to have her on board. And underneath that umbrella is the Rural Economic Development Division. Our big boss of that is Mr. Kenny Flowers. He is the Assistant Secretary of Rural Economic Development. And then we fall under that. We call that Team Red, by the way, Rural Economic Development Division. We're Team Red. And Chuck and I are a staff of about 5 on the Main Street side. And then there are approximately 12 other people who work throughout the state in what we call the Prosperity Zone. We have 8 working in Prosperity Zone. We have 3 who work with the Appalachian Regional Commission for the western part of the state. So we have a team that collaborates and we work together. So if there's a issue that doesn't fall under what we would normally do, we sometimes partner with our planners, such as we partnered recently with one to do ordinance reviews. So we do have access to other resources being a part of this team. We have access to helping you maybe find grants even under the Department of Commerce that don't come under Main Street, but that are under the Department of Commerce as you progress through this program. And we go, this might qualify for X grant. We may be able to connect you with those resources. Next slide. So our mission for the Main Street and Rural Planning Center is simply, and I'm just going to read in the red because that's simply what we do, to inspire placemaking that achieves measurable results. And I will say that we do that through building asset-based economic development strategies. And I'll share a little, share a little bit more about that in a few minutes as well. So next slide. So here's where all of the Main Street and small town Main Street and downtown associate programs are located across the state. We are literally now, we can say Murphy to Manteo. Murphy came in the same time you all did. And so it's 7 downtown associate communities that Chuck and I work with on a monthly basis right now. We began the program in 1980, so you'll see we have 67 because we added the 3 new DAC towns that moved up from the program. So we have 67 Main Street communities and 13 small town Main Street communities. So we keep busy working on all of our communities. Next slide, please. So how we tie to a national program. How Main Street began was under the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They believed that, we were losing a lot of our downtowns when urban development in the 70s sort of bulldozed some of the towns and highways began to bypass them and downtown businesses were moving into malls. So a group of folks said, we've got to preserve these assets that make our communities unique and special. So out of the National Trust began the National Main Street Center. A few years ago, though, National Trust said, okay, it's time to have a standalone. We're still there for you. We're still a partner, but they rebranded and it's Main Street America. They're a subsidiary of that National Main Street program. And then what we do is we're a coordinating state program. Not all states are under the state umbrella. Some coordinating programs are totally nonprofit with supports from the state, like our neighboring South Carolina. They work with the South Carolina Municipal Association, but they are a nonprofit. So they do receive funds from state, but we are an actual state office. But we administer the national program. Next slide. So again, created by the National Trust, and they created the Main Street program, and they developed what we call the 4-point approach to Main Street. This is a tried, true, done it for 40 years now. And 6 states and 30 communities were selected in 1980. So North Carolina has been in this program now for 41 years. The 5 towns that you see listed on the screen, they are still in the program. They were selected in 1980, and they have been administering this program now for 41 years. And if you visit those cities, it should be evident the successes that they've had through administering this program. Next slide. So the Downtown Associate Community Program is the pathway to being a designated North Carolina Main Street program. We took a look at how we were selecting towns and realizing that what we really needed to do was go in and help form a very firm foundation. And we felt like, after a lot of years of doing this, that it took 2 to 3 years to get that foundation started and really, it's like building a house. You set that foundation and, we got to get that on firm ground, and then you come up with the framing and the roof and all that. And it's like, it's like putting that house together or putting that puzzle together. So we want to form that, really firm foundation. Or, like a puzzle, got the edges kind of coming out of the puzzle, got to start with those edges and then fill in the center part of the puzzle. So we provide communities with this organizational foundation. Other DAC programs right now are Murphy and Mebane, that's next door to you, Pilot Mountain, Zebulon, Manteo, and Whiteville. Whiteville's supposed to move up in July. So those are your cohorts, you might say. Next slide, please. So Main Street America, I think this is a really important statement to remind folks about. This is what they believe, and this is what all of our state programs are really trying to embrace this philosophy. What we believe Main Streets are for everyone. At the core of our approach to revitalization is a commitment to creating places of shared prosperity, equal access to opportunity, and inclusive engagement. The National Main Street Center models and champions this vision through our actions and programs. And this approach, again, is through that 4-point approach and through this public-private partnership. This community engagement is an important piece. We wouldn't select Graham or Mebane or Murphy if not for the commitment to a public-private partnership. Next slide. So that leads into what we've accomplished so far. Back in January, we had our kickoff, and then the world stopped, it seems like. So we did, with the group of folks, we did set up and do asset mapping and economic drivers. That was back in June of 2020. We did some SWOT analysis, and we did have some presentations from organization, what that means and how the organization can be set up. We did a presentation on promotion and economic vitality and design. We want you as a community to embrace these 4 points, and we want to try to train everybody so that you can just rattle these 4 points off and know and understand them. So that's why we do these presentations. Today, as a matter of fact, we met with the roundtable supporters and reassessed the assessments because it's been so long since we had looked at them that it was really important that we take a look, because those assets will help you to form the economic development strategies. They will lead to forming those economic development strategies that hopefully you will get to in the next few months. We continue to meet with the roundtable supporters and hopefully empower them to empower you all that maybe you're not part of the roundtable supporters, but could possibly help on one of the committees. Next slide. So here are the 4 points. Organization, it simply means building human and financial resources through those public-private partnerships to achieve a common vision. Economic vitality, strengthening the existing economic assets, expanding and diversifying the economic base. Promotion, selling a positive image of downtown based on the assets of the community. And then design, improving the physical aspects of downtown, which is what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jeff, for doing this. And this is just a visual from the National Main Street Center, which demonstrates that community vision, meaning that you all have to participate in order to come up with the community vision. And it comes from understanding your market and your assets and economic drivers. And then the transformation strategies are developed from all the things that we've been putting together. And they will have an economic vitality action, design actions, promotion actions, and organizational actions. And then we have quantitative and qualitative outcomes, again, the measurables of everything you do. Next, please. Thank you. And the 8 principles. I always like to remind people of this just about every time we talk. This is a comprehensive program. It's incremental. It takes, little steps to add up to big things. It is a self-help program. Chuck and I are here to guide you. Mary's here to coordinate the program, but it is absolutely a self-help program. It is about partnerships. We help you identify the folks that can help you progress the program along. And we build on the assets. We build on what you have and look at those opportunities in what you have, and hopefully from that, growing other opportunities. It's quality focus. We'd rather see you do one project of quality than try to do about 10 things that aren't, of that quality. Change. You have to be willing to embrace change. Things can't stay the same. Things won't stay the same. And you need to look at how you want to tell your story and how you want to manage that change. And hopefully through this program, which has been a successful program for 40 years, this can be a way to progress and make changes and then implement. You got to implement whatever we come up with, or whatever you come up with, I should say, implement the plan. Next slide. So this is the perfect segue into design, and I'm not reading all that comes under, just to give you an idea though. We talk about buildings, displays, streetscapes, signage, and public spaces. All that encompasses design. Next slide. So Main Street mantra, I want you to remember this, is the economic development within the context of historic preservation. And you'll see two fine examples that actually come from Graham: the Vestal Hotel built in 1904 and the Soda Shop 2019. So you all pretty much understand the importance of preserving your architecture. But this presentation is to remind you to continue to do that. Next slide. So design, it is one point of the 4-point approach, and design again is improving all physical aspects of downtown while preserving its historic character. And I'm going to show you just some slides from across the state so that you can, look at them, and maybe there's some buildings downtown that you go, yes, we could do this, and give you some ideas. And it's just kind of fun to look at these pretty pictures as well. Next slide. So what is the design philosophy? It enhances the district's physical appearance through, of course, the rehabilitation of historic buildings, appropriate new construction, long-range planning, and infrastructure. So signage, wayfinding, streetscapes, and again, design is about quality. Next slide. 5 basic areas of focus, as I mentioned before: buildings, displays, streetscapes, signage, and public spaces. And we're going to touch on all of that through looking at some of these photos. Next slide, please. I also want to remind you that people that you need to involve as you go through the program is to include folks such as preservation architects, landscape architects, interior designers. One of my best my background is I was a Mary in other towns. I was a Main Street coordinator. So one of my best design persons for even the outside of the buildings was an interior designer. She had a great eye for color and what looked appropriate. And so she was definitely one I wanted on my committee. Artists, anybody with that creative flair is good to have on your committee. Paint store owners, get them involved. They could become a partner in the sense of maybe offering a discount in paint, buy the paint from them and they'll give you a little bit of discount. A rehab contractor, preferably one with experience. I know you guys have those in your town. So preferably those who understand preservation. Realtors, get them involved, help them, they can be a big asset as well. Your building inspector, very important to have involved, of course, your city planners. And when you have people involved, though, it's important to sign that conflict of interest piece of paper to make sure that you're not looking like you're trying to, let's say, promote your own interest. So it's important to, like I said, get the paint store owner in there, yes, but just make sure they're not trying to promote, hey, buy all your paint through me. We wouldn't want to do that. Next slide, please. I really appreciate you doing this, Jeff, advancing the slides. So areas of responsibility as you do go forward with your economic development strategy committees, you would need people that are very familiar or would like to be familiar with design. So that means educating about good design. And this is kind of step one tonight. I don't know where as participants you are as far as in the design world. When I started out Main Street, all I knew is I liked architecture and I kind of had an eye for what was appropriate, but I'm no designer. But I have an interest in design. So I would never discount someone, who wanted to be on the committee, but didn't, may not be a designer, by profession. So provide that professional advice about design improvements. If you don't know the answer, you find somebody who does know the answer. Plan for downtown's growth. We're going to talk a little bit about infill development tonight, and motivate others to make positive changes by creating incentives. And Miriam, I'll put you on the spot. You guys do have a facade incentive grant program, correct?
That is correct.
Great. So you all already have that in place. That's excellent. Next slide, please. So good design basics, start small. Tackle that low hanging fruit. Now you'll see in one picture, and I will say this comes from one of our downtowns, the dead plants. As Chuck and I were going through downtown, and I looked and I thought, wow, you really just have this out in your street. So start small. If you got dead plants or weeds, make sure you pull those weeds out and plant pretty flowers. Pressure washing. I usually put in my budget every year to do a little bit of pressure washing in areas that needed, some of that cleaned up. And then planters, planting flowers. That's always a good way to start small. Next slide, please. This is a small project. It may not look like small, but you all have done some public art projects. I know in your downtown, Mary's background displays that tonight, but this is one of my favorite projects. And why it is because it's such a simple thing. It's the Ashe County Cheese Factory in West Jefferson. Those are milk tanks. And on those milk tanks, they didn't look too good at the time. They were just these big old barrels out there, and it didn't look too pretty, but an artist had an eye and looked at them and partnered with the high school, Ashe County Cheese Factory, welcomed the students. They welded the heads on, the welding students did. They painted these to look like cows, and lo and behold, this has become a tourist attraction in downtown. So it's simple little things like looking at something and that's why we say include artists on your committee, taking these, ideas and going, those could be cows. Who knew? Next slide, please. So good design basics, there are no themes to downtown. So I'm gonna pick a little bit on Helen, Georgia. People go there, and this would now be considered historic. But back when they did this in the 1960s, they actually added things to buildings that are not appropriate. Again, wait 50 years and things become historic. You guys, thankfully, have not done anything like this, but we just want to remind you, don't do it. You have to wait 50 years before it'll be appropriate. So when I first started Main Street, which was 30 years ago, people would come to me and go, have you been to Helen, Georgia? And we realized, yeah, it's been a tourist attraction, and they purposefully did that, but it is not appropriate design. We want design more like what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, which is Statesville, North Carolina. Next slide, please. And again, streetscape and buildings and all this comes into play. And we want you to remember there are 10 rules with the Secretary of Interior's, they're the Secretary of Interior standards for design. And there are 10 basic rules to them. And I'm not going through those rules tonight. I know you're going, thank you, don't do that. But there are 10 basic rules. And we just want to remind that if you are on a design committee and you're approached about doing something to a building, maybe a facade incentive grant that you want to give out, you need to make sure you're following those guidelines. Next slide. And just an example in Statesville. Statesville is one of our older programs on the left. There's nothing too wrong with that building, but they wanted to enhance it. They had some older photographs of that building, and so they painted it and they put the awnings in the appropriate place. And wow, what a difference that makes. Next slide. And good design basics stresses rehabilitation over demolition. This is a project in Mount Airy. Mr. Gene Reese, he has just been such a champion of their buildings there, but he has definitely utilized historic tax credits. This is an old, I think it was the Spencer Mills, and it is now Spencer Lofts. And if you'll go to the next slide, it will show you the after. And here it is now. It is now where people live there. Who would have thought that, seeing what you just saw on the other pictures? But we have seen many buildings that you would think could never be revived, and they are turned into spectacular spaces. Next slide, please. And here's an example right here in your town with Alamance Arts Camp. So I'm just shocked and looking at that picture. That is the same place. Beautiful. Next slide. And another example, this is the farm services. And what I like about this, in most cases, you can't get the paint off of a building. So somehow the property owners have managed to get the paint off. They put signs in the appropriate places. It's just a really well done job on this building. So I really commend you for taking a look at some of your buildings and going, we can do better. So, next slide. Again, it focuses on quality, which you all have demonstrated. This is one from Shelby where it sat vacant for years, and a very a cabinet shop located way outside of the downtown realized they wanted a really nice place to take their clients and show them the quality. They had clients from all over the world. So they bought this. They didn't want to buy the building. Someone else bought it, but they have a lease agreement, and they needed to pretty much gut it. It was a tax credit project, but it also has residential and an upstairs rooftop bar on it. So it's fully developed now. Next slide. And here's an example from your own town. Look at this. I mean, this is, boy, the aluminum facades that went up in the 60s and 70s. That was modernization. So we applaud you guys for recognizing taking off that aluminum, taking down that awning. You don't know how many places I go, they don't want to take down those awnings. So that's a great example of a well-done project. Next slide. So I know you all have a theater that's very prominent in your downtown, and a good job with that rehab. I have this one from Tryon a few years back. It looked like it might not make it, but it did. Someone bought it and they got a design for it, and they followed those design guidelines, and this is what it to the right looks like now. Next slide. Focusing on quality includes infill. When you have a vacant piece of property, people want to go, let's have a vacant piece of property so we can have more parking. But if you take down more buildings, you're not going to have the people. I mean, you're not going to have anything. So this building was in Brevard. There was a vacant lot. They actually have parking underneath the building, which I think is a great idea. And it's a wonderful example of mixed use development. Next slide, please. Be unique. Every main street has its own history, and it gives it sense of place. And in Elkin, they had this building that was a rock facade, original rock from that area, and it was complete, just a shell. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll show you how that looked. So it's just a shell, and they wanted to demolish it. When I say they, the city was like, we're done, we can't do anything with it. And a group of folks said, you know what, let's save it. Let's save this facade. So they raised funds, they got together, they saved this facade. And next slide. I hope that picture went through. Yeah. So now it's a public gathering space. It actually has public restrooms inside. People can come out there and eat. They have little get-togethers when, pre-COVID. But it's a beautiful spot. And what's so nice about it is that if somebody ever wanted to build inside and do a building, they can go in and build it back. But right now, this is what it's being used for. Next slide. Public gathering spaces. Again, this is an example from Rutherfordton, the first town I ever worked in. This was burned in 1986. And it sat there and they called it the Hole, H-O-L-E. So they asked UNCG to do this design rendering for them. Talk about utilizing these public spaces during COVID and post-COVID. And this was a design that they came up with to utilize this space because realistically at this time they didn't feel like they could do an infill building. Next slide. And public art. goodness gracious, public art is so important. And you all, I really brag knowing, having worked in Burlington, knowing the Alamance Arts Council, beautiful, public art just draws the attention. It's engaging, it attracts, simple, it can be complex, and it can be fun. Next slide. And there you go, beautiful mural. I love that mural. It's probably one of my most favorite across the state. Next slide. Just a couple more examples from your own town. I love that. But we have that all across North Carolina. What I love about public art is the uniqueness and making it unique to your community. A few years back, I started seeing the same kind of sculptures. I think people have gotten away from that and are really much more creative than what I saw a few years ago. Next slide. And that what I saw, your slides reminded me of downtown Cherryville. This was an alleyway. I don't have any before shots, but it wasn't very attractive. And it actually connected to parking on the back lots, but people did not want to walk through that alleyway. So they have the lights and they have all these wonderful sayings. And it's just a really pleasant place now. So don't discount your alleyways when you're thinking of public art. Next slide. And even a kiosk, this is not a really great clear picture, but it's a kiosk. Even they can be attractive. I'm not sure it qualifies as public art, but it is a very attractive display of a kiosk. Benches, I love unusual benches. Guitar, done with tiles, just really attractive. Next slide, please. Downtowns are opportunities to be third place destination. Again, we talk about placemaking, and placemaking means rethinking spaces. Unfortunately, there was a large textile mill there that was demolished, and we frowned upon that. However, out of that came this beautiful amphitheater, and it has really been a catalytic project for a city. But think about your coffee shops, your bars, all of these places are third place destinations. And the more attractive you are, the safer you can make your downtown feel. Downtown does become that destination. And a lot of it has to do with design. Next slide, please. So when in doubt, ask. I know you have design incentive grant programs, and I know you have some design guidelines that are tied in with that. But if you ever get stuck, and I have experienced Main Street managers all the time coming to us and asking. And when you move up to Main Street status, when you move to Main Street status, I'm having a hard time saying that right now. We do partner with UNCG, and they do beautiful renderings for us. This one is in Morganton. The top photo, not bad. But if you look at what they could do with it on the right, much better enhancement. Next slide. And one in Wilkesboro, again, just a little paint really brought out those features, and beautiful project. Next slide. And I wanted to share this one because this was a building in Valdez. It looked like it was a former restaurant, and it was bought, and they wanted to do something. And what do you do with something like that? You can't take the top off of it. It costs a fortune. So it's just paint, a little bit of paint and the sun. And they say it's one of the most popular gathering spots now in downtown Valdez. Next slide. And one of my favorite projects is this little one in Elkin. It sat there. It was a railroad, a ticket agent. I think they stayed there. But anyway, someone bought it and had a vision for it, but they wanted some input from UNCG. So UNCG did this design. So I'm going to show you a progression of how this went. So next slide. So there it is up close and all the details. Next slide. And here it is now. And it's now a little Airbnb. So they did take it back to more original look. And it's just such a cute, sweet building in their downtown district. Next slide. So all that to say, cumulative, I do want to share a few statistics. It's not Main Street unless we talk statistics. So over the, since 1981, there have been over 6,400 building rehabilitations. And then out of that, we've had over 7,000 facade improvements. And I bet those numbers are probably low. These are what's been counted and sent back to us in their annual statistics. Next slide. So testimonials include from Smithfield, how they've seen the great success of this good facade enhancement. I'm sure that the property owners who've enhanced their facades there in Graham, they probably could share some statistics as well. Property owners in Smithfield said that their sales went up by 11%, and I believe that. You don't want to go into a place that's not as attractive as this. Next slide. This was in Goldsboro when they do enhancements. Julie Metz, who was the downtown director there, said they've had sales increase by 35%. Next slide. And then Marion Tomlinson in Statesville, that building was so bland, and they went back and painted those nice details, with the green awning, and did that design, and their sales increased by 15%. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if that's on there or not, in the first 6 months. Next slide. And it is about the details, paying attention to those details. Next slide. So typical design projects, task development, when we get to the plan and do economic development planning, we will, of course, have tasks that evolve around design. Building inventory, this is something that we stress and Mary is working on. You have to know what you have. So when you're doing your building inventory, take note of some of the buildings that may need a little love. We'll have design guidelines. You already have those design guidelines. Other projects, storefront design workshops and presentations. I jokingly say, if I ever owned a business, I would have to have somebody come in and design my storefront displays. I'm terrible with spatial design, just not my cup of tea. So it's important to maybe put together a team. You may not have this problem, but most of the towns I work with, there are some business owners who just had no clue how to do storefront design. So it's good to do some workshops with that. Create that rehab resource. Mary, we do have that guideline that we can send you, or some resources that we can send you that all over the state, but we really encourage you to develop a local regional list of folks that can do some rehab, from awnings to electrical, that sort of thing, that you all create your local list. And again, that ties into maintaining that local regional contractor database. Gather historic photos, and I think you all have some of these already done, but gather those photos, and we love seeing them displayed. And as you go from retail business, those displayed. But what helps us is when you put in a request for design, that we already have that photo. You can say, oh, here's the photo of whatever building and how it looked, because that's the architectural history of that building, and that helps UNCG give you a better design. And then the public-private space improvement plans. I love to see there's, I think it was you, Chuck, you can chime in on this one, was saying in Greenville, the parking lot that's used by day as a parking lot, and then it's used as a flex space for events. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's called the 5 Points parking lot, and it's literally right on, well, what would be it's West 5th Street, which is what is pretty much Greenville's main drag. So it's right there, and it's right at the corner of the other main drag of Evans Street. And like I said, during the day, it functions as a free 2-hour parking lot for anybody visiting downtown. But it also dubs as like an event space, because when they redid the parking lot, they put in all the hookups for the power and things like that, so they can have concerts. They can have, in normal life, when Pirate Fest is going on, that's where they would put all the little kiddie rides and things down in that area. So it's worked out really well, rather than having one dedicated space for each of those. It works out very well.
Yeah. So again, that shared space and thinking about how to utilize spaces like that. Next slide. I think we're getting really close to the final slide here. Yeah, that's it. Questions. It's hard to pare down some of those pretty pictures that we've collected throughout the state. So Mary, appreciate you sharing those from Graham today too with me, and let me include those in the presentation. So questions, thoughts? Again, part of this is educating. Don't see hands raised.
I do believe we have someone with their hand raised. I believe Jeff will promote them to be able to speak.
All right.
Scott Pickard,
Hey, Scott.
just state your name for us and you've been unmuted.
I still see the little mute sign on him, on his name.
Scott, click on mute. You've been allowed to unmute. Maybe he hit it by accident.
Yeah. Anyone else?
There's nobody else right now.
All right. All right.
Well, we have one. Miss Tally would like to speak.
All righty.
Jennifer, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, we went to Statesville recently. One of the things that we try to do is visit a lot of downtowns. And we've been to Texas, and when we go there, we go to, 10 to 20 different places, and then California and North Carolina and all different kinds of places. But I'm just curious, even when we were in Florida recently, there doesn't seem to be a really good map or advertisement, I guess, of the Main Street Americas. You can go on there and get the list,
Yeah.
but I will tell you, like, when we went to Miami, we went to a Main Street America and we were like, where is it at? Like, what is happening? Like, and so how do you, like, I guess the kind of crown jewel type things for like tourism, I would love to have a list of those, not just in North Carolina, but across the nation, so that when we do visit areas, like, and it's something that's 60, every day we went to a new place. And so we kind of love to know where those come, like, I just saw you say Helen, Georgia. So I said, at Christmas, we're going to Helen, Georgia to go check that out.
Check that theme park out.
Yeah, but I mean, it's great. Well, the one we went to in Texas had one of those, I'm sorry, I don't know what you call them, but it's a German town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has the big thing that turns around. That like is like candles at the bottom of it, but it's like massive. And that is, and it has an ice skating rink behind it. But I mean, man, that place, they really do a great job at advertising their community. And we went to several different places in Texas that just did a great job of that. So how do you get that information?
Yeah, how do you know which ones are Main Street? That's a really good question. In North Carolina, we are developing what we call the Main to Main Trail. That's just our website. Not all states are doing that. I think if you were to Google, like, go through the Main Street America website, you should be able, and I was just there this afternoon actually, and I need to look at that, but I don't know how many of them. Virginia's got a pretty good program. If you go to Virginia and look up their Main Street, they've got a pretty good online presence, and they do it by regions, kind of like what we're doing on the Main to Main online. Unfortunately, not all states are uniform, and that's probably something national needs to work on a little better in helping do that. Because I'm like you, Jennifer, when I go to a state, I look up and say, oh, is this a Main Street town?
And I'm constantly, I know people think I'm crazy because I'm not taking pictures of my family. I'm taking pictures of like how they have the sewer running in the street.
Oh, yeah, we do too. Chuck and I do that too. Trash cans.
And they're like, what are you taking a picture of? I'm taking a picture of trees. And
yeah.
And we went to Winterville recently, and it is a beautiful place in Florida. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's just where you get your ideas, and things that inspire you to say, hey, this works here. These kind of things work. These kind of things don't work. So we actually do like look up places when people are proposing things and go and see, whether they work or not in those
Yeah.
posts. But if have any resources, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. I think it goes back to, looking at what works, but also looking at your authenticity when you're thinking about design enhancements. Again, alleyways are great examples throughout, the US right now, and how alleyways are being enhanced. But you've also got to, again, break it down to what would work in your community and get ideas that way. Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer, for adding that. Anybody else?
Let me just chime in just a little bit to that point of, you'll hear Sherry and I all the time saying, and Liz, when you get to see her in person, tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. So that comes back to maybe the other states or the other towns aren't really doing what they need to be doing to promote that program, to promote that as a destination. And unfortunately, there's, unless you have a coordinating program, which all states don't, it's really kind of difficult to, I don't know, I guess, how closely knit Main Street communities in other states without that umbrella of the coordinating program. I don't know if they have, much cooperation as our communities do. Let's put it that way.
Thanks, Chuck, for adding that. That is so true, telling your story. It depends on the community. Travis. Travis had a question.
Go ahead, Travis, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. So I wonder if you have any experience with or guidance to provide for a community that has a downtown in which the properties are owned predominantly by one or two people. And at least one of those people has limited vision, lots of money, and significant political power because of the role that they play. And if this is a project that is going to move forward, how would you advise a community that is already, in a lot of strife in Graham, which you may be aware of? How would you advise a community to work with a business owner in that area that wields such power?
Oh, that's a big question. We'll attempt to answer. Again, it goes back to that public-private engagement is your program, and coming up to when we develop an economic development strategic plan is that part of the process is the SWOT analysis. We list the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when we list those out, those become potential actions. So we do work with towns that, we go in and we go, these properties are owned by one person. And, that starts out really good because, boy, those people that buy those properties, they most of the time, have a great heart and want to do the right thing. And, owns a lot of buildings, but sometimes that's not always the best when one person owns everything. And it just comes to that partnership and building that communication. If it's not a detriment to your community, that's one thing. But in fact, the town I'm living in right now, for years, one family owned all the properties in the downtown. And that person passed away and there was no plan. They had not rehabbed those buildings, and it's been very difficult. So the little town I'm in has a lot of empty buildings right now because of that one ownership. So I think it's important to think about the succession planning and maintenance of the buildings as you own the properties and values go up. So again, it's just getting together and working through this program and process, and hopefully we can help you address that a little better. And I know I'm not completely answering your question because I don't know if there's a really good answer to that.
No, I appreciate that, Sherry. I don't think there is a really simple answer, but it's good to hear that this is something that you've come across.
Yep.
And I know that you shared earlier what seemed to be somewhat of a SWOT analysis that, it's sort of initially been done with round tables. So it's just good to, in a public forum, make sure to reiterate that there are tools, processes, and that this Main Street program is willing to guide and support through what can, the idea is that people have good hearts and what's right. But, when you get people involved, it's just good to know that there are systems, processes, and protocols in place, and that this Main Street group has experience navigating that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I don't know if my colleagues, or anything you want to add, Chuck?
I don't know. That's a tricky situation. It really is. My only suggestion would be to, you try your best to educate that person on, what's appropriate for their buildings, and try to encourage them to get involved in the program, and try to win them over that way. And allow them to feel some of that excitement that Ms. Talley was just talking about, like going to different places. If they buy into that, if they drink a little bit of that Kool-Aid, maybe they'll be more willing to do the appropriate design things.
I was going to add, Sherry, if you're okay with me adding my input, something that you guys have shared along the way that is just so natural to you. I think you'll go, yes, you're right. That this process is a community input.
Mm-hmm.
And just like tonight, we have 18 participants that are on the Zoom call and about 15 that are tuning in through YouTube. And we want to grow that as we get to be in person. So although we may have a singular property owner, they will hear input from the community.
Yes.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, what the property owner does with their property, we have no control over. But the ideas and visions, you touched on that a little bit, of where to move the needle forward for the community as a whole, we hope that we all will join together in that think tank of thought.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary, for that reminder. Other questions? We've got about 6 more minutes.
I'm going to have to promote one because they have an old version of Zoom. Stand by just a second.
Okay.
Go ahead, Scarlett. You've been unmuted.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I appreciate this so much. And we are new residents to Durham, although I'm a North Carolina resident and have been all my life from a small town. And when we moved to Graham, we literally moved here because of the potential we saw for community and for not massive growth or anything like that. We were getting away from that, but mostly just for the beauty of the small town and getting to know people. And so every time we drive around downtown, we're always looking and like, where can we go? Where can we go? And we love the businesses that are there presently, and we wish that there were more. And we would totally support more opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. Chuck and I said earlier today, we think you've got one of the most iconic little downtowns probably in the state. That courthouse, and just a, it's a TV town. It's a real downtown. So thank you for sharing that, Scarlett.
Okay, it looks like Ms. Talley would like to speak again, and then after that, there is no more.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, you've been unmuted. Go ahead. Jennifer, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry. The Main Street, America's Main Street program that they do every year that they fund to get like a grant for that. Is that something that it's like through steel? Like we have a steel dealership and we applied for that. Is that something that North Carolina Main Street helps with us? Because Mary and I worked on it and we submitted it, but we're not sure if we haven't ever done it before, have we, Mary? So we just, thought we'd put it out there, and we've applied a couple of times, and the winner gets like a huge amount of money, and it helps in doing some rehab in the downtown. Is that something that North Carolina Main Street helps with?
Well, we can always review something that you've written. We do have a grant writer on our team. She's not going to write she's more for the state as far as writing grants, but we could possibly review a grant application. I'm not sure I'm as familiar with this program as you're talking about. I try to keep up with every grant that comes across. Our grant administrator is more familiar with that. So maybe you could send us a copy of that. Love to look at that application.
Well, actually, like that's where I get ideas for where to go and travel to see, because they put all their nominees and then like a little profile about each historic downtown. And I think isn't the prize like $50,000, Mary? I can't remember, but I think it's something like that. I mean, you know, I mean, you can't ever win if you don't submit. So
that's right. That's right.
So I just every year just keep trying to submit, and but you know, I'd love for us to be able to do that in our community and use that maybe for lighting or for improving some of our you know, public ways, you know, either our crosswalks or something like that, or doing something that would be really nice in the downtown for everybody to enjoy. You know, I think that sometimes people get misrepresented about what the goals are for historic renovation. And obviously Chuck and I have spent, you know, 25 years, blood, sweat, and tears trying to remodel and restore a lot of the buildings. Are the two examples you gave here from Graham are the buildings that my husband and I worked on and did. And you know, our goal is that at some point before we pass away, to put the properties in a trust so that they do they are preserved, and that we are so lucky here in Graham to have one of the most intact historic downtowns. And you know, a lot of people don't know the history, but there have been developers that have come in the past trying to, I mean, they actually had a demo permit on the entire southeast corner of Court Square. So it would have totally changed the dynamic of that corner if that entire corner was demoed, and they were going to build a bank there at the time. But luckily, we had people here in our community championing. We wrote letters, we contacted people, and actually the bank, and then the bank, we had a twofold win, because we talked the bank into not destroying this entire, you know, this beautiful historic building. And we contacted North Carolina Preservation Trust and got it bought by a contractor, a builder that helped do a huge, wonderful restoration. But in addition, Bank of America ended up buying, which was Nations Bank at the time, ended up buying one of the sister houses on Main Street and completely renovated that for the bank and won all sorts of national awards. Yep. And so we not only converted, you know, someone into loving old buildings and not destroying them, but, you know, for them to actually contribute to our downtown. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
y'all are way ahead of many of our communities, which is great. That helps tremendously.
Jennifer, did you have a question? We do have another hand raised, and I just want to be mindful of our time.
Yeah, just my question was in regards to the nominees and helping us with that grant. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing this very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Mary, did you want to, oh, we've got someone else with a hand raised. We're happy to spend a few more minutes.
Okay, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Maylin Nguyen, and my question is, how do we promote community and encourage commerce in Graham when we've got that really controversial statue?
Yes. This is something that I understand what you're saying, and this is where the area that we feel a little bit out of our box on that. But that is something that needs to be really addressed at a bigger, broader level than Chuck and I can bring to you. We do know that some of our Main Street communities have begun the process of removing some of their monuments. So maybe looking at ways that other towns have started doing that, but we do have many of our Main Street towns that still have monuments as well. So I think take a look at how other communities are peacefully removing those monuments. But you're right, I think it does detract in some ways, or it can give a negative connotation. So that is something internal that I don't think that Chuck and I can really get involved with, but to continue to encourage you to look at ways in which to resolve.
Thank you.
Sherry, Mrs. Chapman has raised her hand again. Do you have time for another question, or would you prefer to move on?
One last question, and then were you going to wrap it up, Mary, with a few closing comments, right?
I will.
Okay. Ms. Chapman?
Thank you again. I just was curious about what Ms. DeWin said, and I think like I agree that no matter how you feel about it, I think it's divisive and just kind of it separates people. And so, as you know, I'm definitely someone that loves history and loves the good things about history. But I just wonder, like, what is Graham doing to ask its residents, like as a whole, how they want to be represented in the downtown? And is that left up to just a few people, or is that something that is actually can be voted upon? Because I would assume most residents of Graham want a positive atmosphere downtown, with all the historic things intact as well.
Well, I think a lot of that could be, and not necessarily a lot of it, but portions of what you're talking about could be addressed through, the work plan and through promotion when we get to the actual tasks. And it could also be part of your plan is to research ways to either somehow make it so that it's not so divisive if it has to stay, and or maybe find a way to remove it, or relocate it anyway. Maybe not in the middle of downtown is probably not the best spot. Maybe relocate it to another part of town.
I just feel like new businesses may not want to choose Graham because of that one thing, and that would just be so sad.
Yeah. And we would encourage, again, I think to Chuck's point, through the plan that we help you create, but again, maybe community conversations, doing things like getting together over Zoom in a public forum and having a very structured conversation, maybe someone else besides someone outside of Graham to mediate that. And it would not be Chuck or me. I'll tell you that right now. There are people who do that professionally, and that may be something that you consider as you move forward to have some very structured conversations with outside mediation. We do need to wrap up. We want to be respectful of your time at 6:36, and thank you for participating. We need you all to hang in there and be participants in this program as it moves forward. We'll have some conversations about when the next meeting will be. So please stay tuned for more notifications from Mary. And Chuck and I, if you have any questions, I think on our PowerPoint, you had our contact information feel free to reach out to us as well if you have questions, and we will do our best to answer them. All right. Mary, do you want to conclude?
Sure. Thank you for joining tonight. Downtown community meeting. Sherry, Chuck, thank you so much for your time this evening and presenting to our community. To our community members, thank you for taking the time out and participating. As Sherry mentioned, they have been very flexible and had to pivot, just like many of you are having to do in your professional life. So if you have not received a direct email from me and you'd like to be on the downtown community email list, please jot down my email. Maybe my coworker Nathan Page could put it in our Q&A box. I haven't been able to access that, but my email address is mfaucette@cityofgraham. So my first initial and last name, mfaucette@cityofgraham. And then the emails are sent out when we have information about upcoming meetings. The other way to stay engaged is to check our website, follow us on Facebook. We're trying the best here at the city to communicate with our community. And just a follow up to Ms. Chapman, we have volunteer boards that you can get engaged in, of course, participate in council meetings, as well as at the end of every council meeting, there is a section, other items on tonight's agenda. If you just wanted to talk to the council, you have a 4-minute window to share your comment. There's nothing that they take action on, but you can just comment. And then of course, building community is getting to know your neighbors and getting our neighbors to plug in, to shop local, to be local. And so I just, this is a start for what we will dive deeper in, as Sherry mentioned, our work plan. So thank you guys for tonight. I look forward to our upcoming meetings that will be scheduled in the future. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.